Cells. Cells are the tiniest living parts that make up every living thing. Even though cells can be very different from each other, they all have three things in common. A cell membrane, which is like a thin cover that keeps the inside of the cell separate from everything outside. Cytoplasm, which is a gooey liquid inside the cell. And DNA, which carries all the instructions for what the cell is supposed to do. There are two main types of cells. The first type is called eukaryotic cells. These cells have special little parts inside them called organelles, including a nucleus, which is like a safe where the cell's DNA is kept. Eukaryotic cells are the fancy, complex kind of cells that make up plants and animals. The second type is prokaryotic cells. These cells are simpler. They don't have a nucleus, or the special organelles that eukaryotic cells have. Their DNA just floats around inside the cell. Prokaryotic cells are always single-celled organisms, like bacteria. They show us that even the simplest form of life can do amazing things. Organelles are like tiny organs inside a cell, each with its own special job to help the cell function. Imagine a cell as a little factory, and the organelles are the workers and machines inside it. First up, we have the nucleus, which is like the boss's office. It holds the DNA, or the instructions for what the cell should do and how to do it. DNA usually looks like a tangled mess called chromatin inside the nucleus. But when it's time for the cell to divide, DNA gets organized into chromosomes inside the nucleus. There's also a small spot called the Nucleolus. This is where ribosomes are made. Ribosomes are like the factory workers who follow the DNA's instructions to make proteins. Once made, ribosomes leave the nucleus and get to work, either floating freely in the cell or hooking up to the endoplasmic reticulum, ER. Speaking of the ER, think of it as the factory's assembly line. It's a network of tubes where materials are transported. There are two types. Rough ER, which is studded with ribosomes and helps make proteins, and smooth ER, which doesn't have ribosomes and helps make lipids, fats. After leaving the ER, proteins and other materials are packed into tiny bubbles called vesicles. These vesicles carry the materials to the Golgi Apparatus, or Golgi body, which is like the factory's shipping department. The Golgi Apparatus modifies the proteins, putting the finishing touches on them by folding them into the right shapes or adding on bits like lipids or carbohydrates. Then, the proteins are ready to be used by the cell, or sent out to where they're needed. Vacoules are like storage rooms in cells, where different materials are kept. In plant cells, there's a big storage room called the central vacuole that holds water, helping the plant stay rigid and healthy. Moving to animal cells, we meet the lysosomes, which are like the recycling and waste disposal team. They take in broken or old cell parts and break them down with special enzymes, clearing up the mess and recycling materials. Then, there's the mitochondrion, known as the cell's powerhouse. In both animal and plant cells, mitochondria are where cellular respiration happens. This process creates ATP molecules, which are like tiny packets of energy. that power all the cell's activities. Cells that need lots of energy will have more mitochondria. The cell keeps its shape with the help of a cytoskeleton, which is made up of microfilaments and microtubules. These are like the cell's bones and muscles, giving it structure and support. Plants have a special organelle called a chloroplast, which is where photosynthesis happens. This process uses sunlight to make food for the plant. And chloroplasts are green because they contain a green pigment called chlorophyll. Plant cells also have a cell wall outside their cell membrane, giving them extra support and protection, something animal cells do not have. Cells can have other unique features too. For example, in humans, cells lining the respiratory tract have cilia, tiny hair-like structures that catch and remove particles from the air when you cough. And some cells have flagella, like a tail that helps them move. In humans, the only cell with a flagellum is a sperm cell. In summary, eukaryotic cells, which include both plant and animal cells, have a nucleus and special compartments called organelles. Prokaryotic cells, like bacteria, are simpler and don't have these structures. But all cells have a cell membrane, cytoplasm, and genetic material. And while only plant cells have chloroplasts for photosynthesis, both plant and animal cells have mitochondria, the energy-producing centers.